Hello, everyone. It's Francis Widdowson here. I am doing this video on September 30th, 2025. This, as everyone knows, is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This title is Orwellian doublespeak because it is the opposite of truth and reconciliation. As we found out in Winnipeg, at the University of Winnipeg on September 26th. And people might be thinking that that's just some kind of odd occurrence, doesn't really have any, it's just an aberration. But this is the end game of what's called truth and reconciliation, because it's really about falsehoods and authoritarianism. That's really what this day is about. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. And hopefully next year, next September 30th, 2026, we will be talking about actual truth and reconciliation. The first thing that we need to address, the major point of reckoning, is the Kamloops case. And I just did an interview with Harrison Faulkner that's going to be coming out this evening, I believe. And he provided me with a clip from Alia Warbus, who is the House leader for the Conservative Party in British Columbia and a nemesis of Dallas Brody. And Warbus was saying something like, why do people care so much about this? And she was insinuating that it was some kind of ulterior motive, perhaps racism or hatred towards Aboriginal people. And she was, if she's being honest, maybe she is, I don't know. She'd never had this explained to her as to why this mattered so much. So what I do on the Harrison Faulkner show is I talk about the importance of the truth, because if we don't have an understanding of a universal truth, we can no longer communicate and try to figure out how to go forward into the future. And so Kamloops is a huge issue because we have a falsehood. We're proceeding on the basis of a falsehood. And we should at least have it recognized that the remains of 215 children have not been confirmed. But all the women that I spoke to, these grandmothers and so on, some of them who are absolutely vicious and assaulted me, and I am going to be providing all the footage to the police, and actually have a whole bunch of footage now that they themselves have produced because they're proud of what they've done. All of them deeply believed that the remains of children had been found. And the reason why they believed this is because the knowledge keepers had said that the remains of children were in the apple orchard. And we can't trust the knowledge keepers. That is not a way of pursuing truth in a universal sense. It's a way of pursuing relative truth, but that's not truth. Truth, as Dallas Brody said, is not about your truth or my truth or your grandmother's truth. It's about the truth. And the only way we can find the truth at Kamloops is through excavations, which, of course, $12.1 million have been allocated to the Kamloops Band between 2021 to 2023 to do the excavations so that they can supposedly bring the children home to the various communities. But of course, we don't have any evidence that there's any children buried there at all. And it's highly improbable that this is the case, because not one parent has said that their child never came home from the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So pursuing the truth is of the utmost importance. And until we are doing that, we're not going to be able to have all the other conversations that we need to have, such as, is capitalism the best system, which used to be the discussion that went on between the left and the right, but that no longer happens anymore because we're all distracted on all these postmodern ideas and woke ideas about transgenderism and, there is no such thing as biological sex, all these ridiculous ideas, which of course in, 20 years ago, we would be arguing about economic factors that actually mattered to people. Well, it matters to people now because we're in such a our society is falling apart. So we're concerned about things which are absurd instead of actual things that are about meeting the needs of people, which brings me to the Aboriginal population. And for Aboriginal people who are listening to me now, you might disagree with me. I'm sure there's areas where I'm wrong, but I am going to tell you what I truly believe, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to try to manipulate you. And the problem that is facing Aboriginal people, which Albert Howard and I have been saying since the 1990s, is a developmental problem, a cultural development problem. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the fact that Aboriginal people who are marginalized, and this is not Negon Sinclair, it's not, all the neo-tribal elites, they're perfectly integrated and they do very well in modern society. It's the isolated Aboriginal people who still are basically immersed within a hunting and gathering culture, which is less developed. That culture is less developed than the culture of modern nation states. So when you have that situation, you need to be able to provide things to people who are marginalized that will help them to be able to participate. And if we want to understand the suffering, the terrible suffering of Aboriginal people, it's because they are not participants and therefore they feel that they don't matter. And learning Aboriginal languages, all these boutique ideas, this does nothing to address this problem. Aboriginal languages are pre-literate languages. Therefore, they are not functional within the modern context. And this is indicated by the fact that to develop writing systems, you actually have to have European produced writing systems, or those cultures that produce writing, because there is no writing within the Aboriginal population. And of course, we use these international phonetic alphabet type things. There's some variants on this, which are totally incomprehensible to everyone except for a few linguists. Now, I know there's some neo-tribal elites like Ted Godberson Jr. who are making a good living from teaching everyone these languages, but that's not going to be the thing that's going to help people in the future. It's going to be being able to participate in the economy, work 9 to 5, and have meaningful work that contributes to society. And until people are able to do that, they're not going to feel that they have a meaningful existence. And this is comes out of, for people who are going, oh, well, that's a right wing kind of idea. It's actually comes from the ideas of Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky formulated the theory, what he called the law. I'm not confident enough to call it the law. I think it's a theory of uneven and combined development. And that means that when you have two cultures with very, very different levels of development, then what you're going to see is that the less developed culture is going to have to change more than the one that's more developed. And the one that's more developed will, to some extent, absorb some of the features of the less developed culture. And that's what's happening now in places like Winnipeg. Like you can really see it, is that places like Winnipeg, because of the large Aboriginal population, which is still in a tribal state, are becoming tribalized. And what we had in Winnipeg on Friday, we were able to develop an understanding of the breakdown of civilization that's happening in Winnipeg due to the pandering towards Aboriginal culture. If you go in Winnipeg, you see all over the place all these things about Aboriginal culture, when that is going to pull that society backwards into a pre-civilized state, instead of giving Aboriginal people who are in a tribal state the kinds of strategic resources, not money, but the educational, health, housing, developmental resources that they will need to survive in modern society. And that's really what's occurring. But instead of dealing with this, we have all these idiotic orange shirt days. And because of the authoritarianism, I think that brown shirt day would be a better way to characterize it. Because what we saw in Winnipeg on Friday was pure authoritarianism. People worked up into a frenzy because they did not want me to lay out my Spectrum Street epistemology mats to discuss a claim that was put forward by Negon Sinclair. It was Negon Sinclair's claim that residential school denialism is a barrier to reconciliation. All I was trying to do was discuss that claim, and all these authoritarians got worked up into a frenzy. It's really hard to be believed what they were screeching, these cry bullies, these female cry bullies, who of course are tools of the Indigenous gangsters. So that's what happens, is that the Indigenous gangsters show up when these elders are all brought in. So they're claiming that I can't speak because it's upsetting for the elders, but the elders are all brought in to confront me. So the elders are confronting me, people like Geraldine Shingus, who has nothing valuable to say whatsoever. Let's be honest here. And she just keeps on, ranting about how I'm saying she's lying and so on. When I'm not saying anyone's lying. I think it's misremembering, confirmation bias, and a different conception of truth. She truly believes that, the remains of children are there because the stories say so. Anyway, she was absolutely hopeless to communicate with. I don't know why that's the case, whether it's because she's been pandered to for so long, or maybe she's just an elderly person who doesn't understand things very well. But she is a vicious bully who is ironically calling me a bully. She was one of the people who assaulted me. By what happened was 6 women, or maybe more, but I can only account for 6, locked arms with one another, circled me, and were trying to move and push me off of the campus. And that's assault when you're pushing someone and manhandling in this way. When I sat down, I had Shingu's Ketchum, who's the worst bully, the worst vicious, most vicious one of them all, who incidentally is, basically rubbing shoulders with Wab Canoe and the chief of police today. So we all know why security and the police stood down on the 26th. They all leaned over me and abused me verbally at that, and intimidated me, threatened me, all these things that were happening. So whatever you want to call it, it was just an absolutely unacceptable way to treat someone who was just doing nothing to them. I had nothing to do with them. If they didn't want to hear what I was saying, they could have just not gone there. But I had authorization from the provost. We did find out it's Provia, Pavlia Radia, I believe her name is. Sorry, I probably butchered her name. Anyway, she sent an email out to all the faculty saying, and I have this document now, saying that no one was to block me from being on campus, and that they respected diverse viewpoints and all this other nonsense, which they don't believe at all. And they actually served me a trespass notice. Why they did that? And then, of course, the gangsters, they're just there running free. No one cares about anything that they do. So there's going to be a reckoning on what happened at the University of Winnipeg. I will not let this go. I will not give 1,000th of a 1 inch to all this nonsense that is happening. And what we need, or perhaps it should be on the next National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, we can do a Spectrum Street epistemology at the University of Winnipeg. The president of the Faculty Association, I think he should send the invitation, Peter J. Miller, because he implied that I was a liar, and I am not going to let him get away with that. What is the evidence of lies? And what are his views on the remains of 215 children being found at Kamloops? Does he think that that's the truth? Because there's no evidence for that. And then we have the history department. that egged on all the students and made delegitimize my position on the university. It is just absolutely shameful what everyone has done at that university, and I will be holding them to account. So that's my message on the National Holiday for Truth and Reconciliation, Spectrum Street epistemology. That's the way we're going to pursue the truth. And I expect the University of Winnipeg at some time in the near future to invite me to their campus with the appropriate security to do a Spectrum Street epistemology session on the claim the remains of 215 children have been confirmed at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Because don't get distracted with any other claims. This is the fundamental claim that there needs to be a reckoning on. Everything else about sexual abuse, mistreatment, and so on, this is all needs to be argued out in various contexts, but I'm not concerned about those issues at all. I'm only concerned about Kamloops. We need to find the truth about Kamloops because Kamloops is the card in the house of cards that when you start to pull on the Kamloops card, you will see the house of cards begin to crumble. And all the nonsense that's been going on for the last 50 years, which to the detriment of the marginalized Aboriginal population, we will finally be able to, put our efforts towards addressing the terrible problems facing Aboriginal people, such as the huge fetal alcohol syndrome problem, which was very much in evidence on September 26th at the University of Winnipeg. So let's think deeply about this. And the next time you're asked to do a territorial land acknowledgement or put on an orange shirt or all these other nonsensical corporate initiatives, say, how is this helping the marginalized Aboriginal population, which should be the focus of what we are doing on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Thank you very much for listening. I'll do another video in a couple of days.